think we can call the meeting to order because we have a quorum. Should I hand these things out? There's an amended part in the circulation and library card policy. And so when we vote on that, we'll point you to what's changed from what's in your packet. So take one of those. And at the end of the meeting, we sort of look at the agenda for next month, and that's changed slightly. So take one of those as well. I don't usually call myself my health to anybody's attention, but I had knee surgery a few weeks ago. And so if I stand up and start walking around, don't think I'm that weird. I plan to just sit, but you never know. Okay, is there any public discussion? No? No? Okay. Then moving on, it's not what I expected, but we have items to be discussed. Mostly they're policy reviews. Some require action and some don't. So we will start with the first item, which is Ellsworth to discuss budget.
Thank you. So budget discussion has been something that's a standing item on the agenda for the next several weeks. This is the time of year that we're kind of getting deeper into the budget process. This month, there's not a whole lot to discuss. Just to keep the board up to date, we've had the budget, we've met with all of the departments in the library, talked through how we'll be taking budget requests this year, kind of going over what we think the philosophy of the budget is going to be, and ask them to submit to administration their adjusted budgets. And that's all come in, everybody's looking good. The next step with that will be Kelly and I will go through and start to take all of the separate requests and merge them into the library's request in the UNIS system. This year, the timing is going to work out that we have this information pretty early in the game. While we've had some budget orientation kind of meetings for the year, we haven't really been given the big narrative kickoff where the city administration sort of says, so let's go over generally where the city stands, kind of what we're thinking about at City Hall, what we're thinking about with our departments that have semi-autonomous or autonomous boards. So that hasn't happened yet, but it's coming up. And then, of course, we'll take that information into consideration before we write our budget in brief, which comes to the board before we finalize our request to the state. The CIP process runs right along with the budget. That's the capital improvement project. And you saw in my director's report, I updated one of our standing reports and I put in a new report, a new request, neither of which felt particularly unexpected, but happy to have dialogue about that when we get to that report. The CIP entries are due tomorrow. So we'll put those, we'll submit those to the city tomorrow. The next due date will be what's called the city budget book entries, which is basically a departmental overview. It's a chance to kind of list some of our accomplishments, put a few photos in, kind of what council will look at as they enter into looking at our budget request for the next fiscal year. And then after that, at the end of that'll be at the end of the month. At the end of October, we'll go into the bigger parts like the budget narrative and the budget inputs. So it's looking a lot like last year's process. It feels like a lot of moving pieces, but it's pretty logical. They've got a pretty nice system here. there's been lots of changes in the finance department in the past fiscal year or so. And so far, I've just been really impressed with how patient and how generous people are with their time when we have questions and walking us through things. Since we are a semi-autonomous department, we do a few things a little bit differently. And I just have nothing but positive to say about working with the city through those nuanced pieces. So far it feels positive, feels like we're on track. I look forward to CIP feedback when we get there. There's no action needed, but any questions or thoughts right now?
So the budget in brief will be just, it won't be hard numbers. It'll be just,
It will be numbers.
it will be numbers.
It's sort of condensed lines. So you'll see across the board, it's like we take the departmental numbers and pull them into categories.
And that's what we expect next month.
We should have a draft of that next month. It's not due till the city for a little while longer, but we like to have time to do a revision with the board.
Questions? Other comments? No?
So also within the absence of guidance, have departments been thinking about increases?
I would say it's been
In the absence of city guidance?
it's been modest. I don't know the average. I can't tell you the average.
Sure,
offhand of what
people are thinking about a little bit more.
Very strategic, both in linking with strategic initiatives when we are asking for more, but also in trying to balance very carefully what we're doing. So sort of being able to say, we may ask for less in processing, but we know we're going to mirror that with an increase in something else. I do anticipate putting some personnel feelers out this year. I also anticipate the responsibility to be not right now, but I think putting that out so that we have a record of those requests, again, tied very closely to library, city council initiatives. And I will probably have a separate report about that next month, just sort of about what the vision for that would look like.
Anybody else? Before we move on to the first policy review, which is Elizabeth, you're going to present this review. It looked like there were amendments.
The only change is to add that we reviewed it on this date. We're not suggesting any changes. And you can see it's just a one page that basically describes the way that we changed some language to differentiate from the city to the library.
Comments from the board? No? So we have to make a motion that we reviewed it? Okay. Would somebody like to make a motion?
Moved.
Need a second?
I will second.
Okay, so the motion is to note that this policy has been reviewed today. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okey-doke. The next one is another administrative one, right? Oh, general library. Oh, no, this is the big one. This is the big one. And I mean,
Yeah.
first of all,
You did a
if
lot.
I can just ask, like, there's a lot of red and you kind of explain that. So why is there so much red?
So this policy is changed every time the city
Right.
changes its personnel policy.
Okay.
And they made a lot of significant changes. I think some of it stems from the DEI work that they've been working on, expanding sections, especially the sexual harassment. This is where policies, responses to federal law, responses to state law. And then you can kind of tell what their priorities are by the things that they shifted around. We try to closely align with the city's personnel policy as closely as possible, because there are human resources expertise, there are legal expertise. Where we do differ is just if it's library specific. So I've outlined some of the things that we keep, including say library director and some manager. We just kind of add those components in. And then if there's library certification that's needed, or if there was things that the city does like civil service and some employment that is not applicable here, or pre-employment drug tests, which we do not require, we remove those where necessary.
So most of the red is the city's doing.
Yes.
Okay.
So we did not make any significant changes to library specific things, except for they changed state accreditation for they call them endorsements now for library.
Okay. So.
I apologize for all that.
No, it's okay. And I kind of thought that that was it. I just wanted you to, I didn't want the board to have the impression that you all had sat down and rewritten the whole policy. So as a board, they've got comments or questions or beyond the fact that it's dry. Not my comment. I think it's very exciting.
Dry.
I didn't find it dry. That's not my comment. I'm not saying where.
I read it 8 times.
Yes, I'm sure you did.
Is there anything that you may have found concerning that you or the reviewers found concerning anywhere in this? I know a lot of the alignment was to just stay in compliance, stay in law. But anything that stood out where it's like, that really, okay.
No, everything made sense.
I want to keep it notional, but
Yeah.
by the way, I really appreciate the inclusive pronouns. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Just one other question, but to kind of dovetail off of it. We did hear some questions from staff sort of about the social media policy parts of
I
this.
was wondering about that.
Not necessarily hard criticism or even request to change, just sort of wondering if we were going to align with that, if there was sort of more to be said. I think often when these policies are changed, there is a question of, did something happen that led to this?
Sure.
Which in this type of policy, of course, would be confidential. I think that was able to be talked about at departmental levels in a way that satisfied most of those questions.
Okay.
I would say, from my vantage point, it's an extremely balanced and fair approach to social media representation. We're really not asking for anything but the basics of what is the norm. And we don't have hard plans to revisit that, but I think if we were going to explore any sections for deeper work, that would be one that I'd want to look at a little bit.
Refined if
But
necessary.
right now, I feel really good about it. Does anybody else have a very specific question staff have? That was the only thing.
I had a question about headphone use, and I think we kind of that departmentally too.
Okay.
I was really happy to make sure that they were responding to us and read it and brought us questions was as they came.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that was an odd one I saw.
We don't want people to wear headphones on the public floor.
That's right.
You're right.
But if they're cataloging in the back,
Yep.
that's fine.
Anybody else? Oh, all that red and we're ready to vote already. Okay.
Lots
That's half the packet.
Hmm?
That's half the packet.
Yeah, well, no, yeah, maybe. The other half is the other one.
Yeah, right.
So I need a motion to approve the policy with the changes.
Moved.
And I need a second.
A second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the amended policy. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. The next one is a policy 503.
This is one of those, just page 37 in the packet. One pagers that says we can apply this policy. We noted just what we thought was a small grammatical error, and then the recommendation that's always going to come with this is that we attach the current contract and take out the outdated contract. So for those of you who've been on the board a while, this will just be something you've seen before. But questions, we're happy to answer if you have any.
Anybody want a discussion about the handbook? No, it's dry too.
Even drier.
Even drier. Okay, so now I need a motion to approve policy 503 with the minor change to 503.2. Good job. I need a second.
Seconded.
Okay. So we have a motion to approve policy 503 with the minor amendment.
And I'm sorry, second, please.
Mouth.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Right, then we are on to our last policy review, which is the library procedure policy review. We started this one last month in order to approve extending the fine-free period through the end of the fiscal year. And then this is the rest of the policy. It's circulation policy 801. And I believe Tom brought a change, something that needed to be changed to the attention of Ellsworth. So if you didn't get, I think you all got one of these. So towards the end of policy 801 in your packet, the change and a revision. There's a revision, actually, it looks like a couple of them. 801.32. Apparently, we don't use a collection agency anymore. Is that correct?
It's not our common practice. Well, we still have a partnership with one. It's just
Okay.
the way that we change materials that have been lost or not returned yet.
So.
I'm confused. Did you recruit the change? I was looking at this, it looks like we are still including. Are we still including a collection agency or only law enforcement?
Actually, at 801.32 in the amended one,
Yeah, I'm looking at it.
it's
Right.
crossed out, I think.
So only law enforcement.
So what are we doing? We're not going to pursue this at all in terms of collections? Right. This has been a big issue in the past. We're not going to be using collection agency.
It's been common practice since I joined about a year ago that our notification system and then anything that would exceed a specific amount and require like law enforcement agency, like the return of like equipment.
Right.
Several $100s, we would use the like camera footage.
So this change excludes us from being able to go back to a collection agency option in the future.
Right, so collection agencies are only going to deal with a specific threshold amount, and then they can only deal with it after X
Right.
amount of years. So we realized that at $10 an equivalent.
Right, we would go for that.
Return on investment for the community.
Right, I'm not thinking of that. I'm thinking of the large amounts we have that disappear at times.
Right.
And we just do this strictly to law enforcement.
Because the collection agency only sent letters, right? They did not send personnel. They would end up
I know.
employing the police to do
Right.
any site visits. Anyway.
And I guess my hesitation when I'm thinking about this is using law enforcement for someone who's got missing materials rather than trying to do something as a first step, such as a collection agency before we go to law enforcement for overdue items or for.
If it helps, law enforcement is a rarely used occasion, and it's really more about like the theft of library materials, like
Right.
things like equipment has not come back. So it's a really rare kind of for it to occur in praxis. We have 3 notifications, something that is about to be due, something that is due, and now something
Right.
that's selected bills. And if folks bring the bill material back, and that bill is usually what gets it done. Then it's white.
Yeah.
And returned to the collection. And so we just realized that there's a better return on investment to get materials back and circulate into the collection if we don't have that third party step, because we're losing folks who feel like, oh, I got a notification from a bill collector, my relationship with the library is now closed. I'm going to kind of avoid the situation as opposed to like, hey, you sent me something, can I make it right directly with you? And we've just kind of noticed that approach has brought more people in the door. It's continued those partnerships and relationships with folks. And it's really kind of made it unnecessary to ever bring law enforcement in unless it's a significant dollar amount.
So when Unique was doing that, was part of the notice system,
So they
would they come in at the point of when we now send the bill?
would come in at replacement. I'd have to rewind the tape. I think that if like fines and fees exceeded $50 is what I want to say we would have stepped into. And then we graduated to now if items are billed, and now it's just if items are billed. We're not kind of having that conversation about late fees, because if the items are returned, then they're back into circulation.
Is there a permanent record when law enforcement is used to collect these items? So I'm thinking about the effect on a high school age student who's made some poor decisions, but is there a permanent record that follows once law enforcement is called in?
That's a great question. So like the removal of the collection agency or the placement of the collection agency piece doesn't really remove how that process escalates, other than they only get one bill now instead of it being from a third party that they don't have to connect with. It's directly from us. So then when it exceeds to that piece, we're really conservative about when we would take it that far. And it's typically like, this is an item that we have 10 of. It has 50 holds on it. The community really needs it.
I understand that we don't do it very often, but the fact that we have a written policy doesn't mean we'll all be the same people in the room when this should come up.
And
they're just thinking-
Should be wiped at 18. But yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Is there a way we could potentially codify that threshold? I'm just throwing out ideas here because I understand, Robin, correct me if I'm wrong, that your main concern here is we'd be losing out on a tool in our toolbox.
Yes, possibly at a middle level tool, possibly that.
Okay.
But, I understand what you're saying, that there's an effectiveness issue here, that when in an extreme situation, using law enforcement is more efficient. I'm just wondering if it has to be the step we jump to.
Well, if you would like to retain it in policy, that makes sense. We haven't been really applying it in procedure, and I understand why it's hard because we can't find tree for the West.
Yeah.
Right, so really it's going for large missing items, expensive missing items.
Well, and when items are missing, a conversation with the library directly just seems to be much more effective. It's a bit off-putting.
Can I ask you one more question about it? When you call law enforcement, if it's a minor, is the law enforcement pursuing the parent as responsible for those materials?
And if it is an equipment item, that parent has signed a waiver to
Right.
allow.
So the minor doesn't necessarily deal with law enforcement, the parent does.
According to Iowa code, it's the parent's
Okay.
responsibility.
The responsible party, caregiver, parent. Yeah.
I trust the staff, and it's just, there's a piece of me that it causes pain to think that we're going to call law enforcement for missing library materials. But I understand these are extreme cases and we need a power for that.
But taking the collection agency out, Necessarily increase the number of times we call law enforcement, right?
No, that's what's interesting is like all three pieces exist, the collection agency piece, the library notification piece, and in dire straits, the law enforcement agency piece, which is very rare. Just point out the collection agency is just a more transparent and accurate representation of what we're doing because we're not submitting $10 forms as frequently for a third party to send a notification on our behalf. And occasionally they can get up-to-date contact information, but those are like the one key pieces that unique brings to the table. And the conversations are just much more fluid and open and productive when it's direct from your library.
So let me parrot that back to make sure, because I'm thinking of 3 levels of escalation here. One is going to, and as currently outlined, it's 1 library, then collections, then law enforcement.
So yeah, essentially, you would go through like the 3 different types of notification bill. Then we used to do pre my time here collections.
Yep.
And you would just run a list and it could be like the same collection for the same person for months on end. You know what I mean? Because that's kind of hard to pull out in the thousands or the hundreds or even the scores.
Sure.
And then if it met a specific threshold in connection to Iowa code, then we would review it and decide this is something we submit. And then they just send a certified letter. And that's essentially what happens. And usually at that point, I'm going to say 9 times out of 10, the material comes back and occasionally it will go further. And that's just kind of when we like pull the tape and say, yeah, let's see what we can do to make this work.
And so what we're proposing is expanding the, what's the word? The role of public library to account for that gap that was previously occupied by the collections agency. So yeah, it's true that the public library's process would butt up to the law enforcement side of the house when that happened. But to your point, extremely rare. And also it seems like what you're saying is that it's going to be a more kind transaction, as it were.
And Unique used to actually be able to affect your credit score. It would actually like ding you. And it doesn't now, but many people still assume it does. So you get those conversations of, I cannot believe you submitted this and didn't just have this conversation with us. You dinged my credit. You know, like people would go to buy a house. And so it was like, that's a terrible, that is a terrible perception of your public library where it's like, you should have just sent me a bill.
Like
and so that's usually where it ends. That's typically where it ends unless it's extreme. And so I guess that's why we're advocating for that to not only happen in praxis, but if it's going to happen in praxis, just be very transparent in our policy that not only A, does the collection agency we use do that anymore, but B, the library is not in the maybe the habit of dinging people's credit because something happened in their life and they couldn't get an item back.
Yeah, that changed in June of 16.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's probably when we started getting away from using them.
Okay.
We might have an opportunity to talk, so we have a relatively new police chief still, Dustin, and they're developing some new sort of community engagement type roles in that department. I wonder if this warrants a discussion with him to sort of see, maybe we could be more specific and we could say that we would engage the local law enforcement agency with the community resource officer, or with we could sort of soften that and be more specific about it's not drugs are out, or it's more.
It's a certified letter.
It's more, a letter or a resource type thing.
Which is kind of what it is now. It's just that one more level of like, not only is your library saying this, but now like your community saying this, you can bring that property back and make sure that everybody else gets to have the access to it as you want.
And how often do you contact law enforcement for long overdue?
So this is anecdotal. I've been here for 12 and a half months. I think that it's come up twice. And it was like missing pieces of art that once that certified letter came for hundreds of dollars, it's like, oh yeah, we're in the middle of a pandemic. I'll get those back to you right away. Or can you meet me outside? I don't want to come inside. And it was like, for some reason, the notifications and the bill didn't get us there. But that extra layer got us those pieces of art back. And it was like, yeah, we could totally work it out with you as long as you connect with us. And sometimes I think that's just a little nudge folks need. I'm not sure that that door would have been open for that opportunity if they assumed that the credit had been. That makes sense, but of course that's anecdotal.
I was just wondering about like long overdue versus stolen, and if you approach it differently, you define it.
That's a great question. So like after it's hit the build process, essentially it is stolen property, but that's when we kind of look at the bill, like after a certain amount of time, right? And then we look at like the dollar amount, and then we decide, how do we pursue this? What is like the best course of action for us as stewards of this collection? And the threshold for staff to waive is $100. So I really feel like we're trying to be fluid, but at the same time making sure that this is a collection that is truly accessible to everybody.
Big question is, what do we do right now?
Well, is someone ready to make a motion to approve this circulation policy?
I'll make a motion.
As written?
That we approve it as put forward.
A second? Okay. All right, all in favor of approving the changes to the circulation and library card policy 801? All opposed? Okay, I'm just gonna editorialize a bit here. I actually have decided that I'm gonna read the library trustees manual cover to cover, and I started that process. But one of the things that it points out that a board member should do is when they're reading the packet, if they notice something that's like incorrect, such as Tom noticed this issue about the collection thing, is to contact Ellsworth ahead of the meeting so that it could be dealt with and put. So if you're looking at the packet and you notice something that you think is probably not right, take that extra step and let him know ahead of time so that it saves time and angst at meetings, I think. All right, that's the last of the policies. I believe so. Right, on to staff reports. Ellsworth, you're first.
All right, I tried a little bit different approach this month in lieu of doing a bunch of standalone memos with things that don't need any action. I sort of rolled them into a report and attached them there. So feedback now or later on that is welcome. But everything sort of stands as it was written. I think that can Manny come to a board meeting, Sam, to be introduced yet?
No.
Okay, we'll bring Manny Galvez to meet the board. He's the new PR assistant, not so new anymore, but he hit the ground running and has just been an amazing force on our staff. We're so proud of him to be inducted into the Iowa Hall of Fame, and I really want to celebrate that with him. Otherwise, went through the service guidelines draft, which for anyone who's been following along is essentially an edited introduction to the form of guidelines with the benchmark pieces, sort of the hard benchmark pieces taken out. That's kind of where I am with it right now. This one feels harder to work through than the first one because of sort of the reporting changes and things that we do and don't know. If there is any feedback from this group tonight about how people think that should evolve, that'd be great. If not, my plan next is to share this piece with all staff and sort of welcome input around other more specifics people would like to see. Have we moved completely away from sort of a phasing idea? What we're hearing from Susan Valletta and other resources is Times are not so much including shutting down anymore, but it's now sort of how you're gonna deal with business as usual in this still atypical time. It's important to me that the document reflects that we do want to be very careful, we want to lead with that sort of safety first lens. But I also think the optics of being the only public library in the Midwest to shut down based on a certain benchmark, we need to be really ready to defend that. So that's that. I feel like I did have one question for it that was kind of like, I think you didn't include part of what was supposed to be. And I know it feels very incomplete right now, but I would welcome feedback of how to make it stronger. If people have any thoughts.
Well, when I read it, I mean, my reaction was it's not a guide for decision-making. But by the same token, exactly as you said, I really can't, it would take a lot, I think, before we wanted to shut down again, because other places aren't shut down. You know, nothing else is shut down. So I don't know. I mean, I'm with you. I'm not sure. I don't know what more it can be.
Right. I mean, it does help in the sense that it lays out, these are things to look at. And that's important, but I think any future decisions are going to be ad hoc. We can't pre-program them.
And I think the justification at that point is what matters, you know, not just to say these are the factors we've considered, but these are the specific indicators that led to this decision.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, certainly in the schools, I think like if X percentage of the kids or the teachers or the whoever staff is out sick, I don't know what the threshold is, 10%, 25%.
There's no.
Then you have to close. And, you know, I think if 25% of the staff came down with COVID,
Right.
then there would be the times we got closed for 2 weeks, but that's not going to happen. Right.
Well, that's great feedback right there. So I think that I do want to share it again with staff, see if anybody has seen or heard of anything that they think is especially meaningful. We'll keep working on it as we learn more. I think everybody would love to be done with it, but we realize we've got some time left to work with it. The CIP documents that I mentioned are here. The flooring one have been going on for many years now. And that last year, I had submitted a second CIP to complement the second floor request. The first floor request erroneously was thought of as a replacement. So that's why I put both into one large CIP to avoid any confusion. We did do just a couple very small flooring updates this year because we considered them to be at the point of a safety issue. The staff elevator had the original flooring. It's a very small service elevator. We also had a problem with someone urinating into the back door of the library. Maintenance, it didn't need to be replaced. So that was also replaced. A fairly small area. And people may remember the children's room had a flooring update not too long ago after a sewage issue. So a few of these pieces have been dealt with, but just as the building ages, this is a necessary project. It will be a surprisingly big project when it happens. Moving all this stuff around takes more time and planning than it seems like it would, and we will work with lots of folks to make sure that we have a project that'll float well. I don't anticipate much council level discussion about this one just because they've seen it before. And this is the change to it. I chose to write this, but absolutely welcome to input with saying that we were asking for the full project amount. This is sort of a core piece of building maintenance. In my mind, we've taken exceptional care of the building since it was open. I think everything is lasting 2 or beyond expected lifespan. My feeling was I'd like to submit it that way, see what the response is, and if there's a conversation about that, then we could revisit that and sort of see what threshold we felt interested in. The library is also historically a low CIP request part of the city, unless it's a true building project, they tend to be on the lower value side. And we're not a vehicle fleet kind of department, so I thought it was worth it to take that first step. And the other one is a new one to folks, but it's a logical step from an existing request to have the space needs of environmental study done for the building. Again, I just see that as something that you need to do with your building as it ages. We obviously have a community interest in trying to keep our carbon footprint small, keep our environmental impact as positive as we can. And it feels like combining that with a space needs study will just sort of let us take care of those 2 things in tandem. So we may get feedback that the building environmentally is still pretty sound, but we can walk through the best practices and staff spaces and things like that. One thing we learned from COVID was let's not attach anything to the floor that we can put wheels on in the staff rooms, because you never know when they're going to get the directive to spread everybody out 6 feet. And again, the vast majority of this stuff is original to the building, and I think we've been great stewardship with it, and it feels like asking for some resources to implement findings just makes sense to earmark for that next project.
Is there any thought why to push that back 5 years? Or is there any reason to do it sooner or reason to think that's the time?
I think that feels like a good time to look at. I thought about putting it earlier, but I'm going to be honest. I think the recovery from COVID is going to take years.
Be a multi-year process.
To know
Sure.
what is the service model really going to look like? How much backroom space do we need? Will we go to a hybrid staffing model where some people are at home or annexed to different places? I also think the leadership team talks a lot, and the general staff as well, about when are we going to talk about expanding library footprint? And it's always a fascinating conversation. But this year, next year, the following year, I just can't imagine being in the right space to do that responsibly. I think we need to work really hard to re-engage the community, re-engage our physical building use, and be in a place where we can ask a wide, diverse slice of our community, let's talk about the vision. Let's talk about what we need now in 25 years, in 125 years. And I think doing it now would just be a disservice to the future.
We're off balance to a certain extent.
And
Yeah.
I just feel like, I don't know about everybody else, but the older I get, the faster the years go. And they're going to be here before we know it. And we'll have plenty of other work to be doing in the meantime. And there are other projects that will make sense to do. Maybe a full staffing study and things like that. That will only feed into that in a positive way.
My question is, Okay, so the study's going to be done in FY 2025. And we're asking for $125,000 to implement the things that are found in the study, but so is that 125 just kind of a random number, or do you have in mind like HVAC's got to be replaced, or, I mean, I'm wondering why 125?
So
If somebody asks you that,
I reached out to my network director, Fred.
okay,
So they said, for people who have done this kind of study, and many of them had only done one, a space need or environmental or whatever it might be, how fast do you find you could turn around and get work done? And was it like you got sort of a dossier of you had to do all this right away, or do they help you stage it? And the way that the most articulate person kind of explained it was, in their experience, it was sort of like when you get a home inspection before you buy a house. Like, these are the critical things. These are the things that you'll want to work into your next, replacement schedule for your HVAC and things like this. And here are things that will be kind of bonus. So I'm not anticipating that $125,000 will answer the study. But I think it would let us start to think about, okay, so clearly everybody here needs a different office chair, or we do the venting system for the HVAC has to be replaced. And we can take that one step forward. And part of that is just getting that momentum ready so we can come back to your partners in funding and say, we're really pleased to be able to start these three pieces. We think this will be the environmental or staffing impact. We look forward to, talking more about what the change will look like. The fear is to have a stagnant time between study results and being able to request what you're going to do with it. It wouldn't surprise me if this was either not approved as it's written or was tabled for right now. But I think with this kind of process, having the conversation, letting finance know what we're thinking, so we never want them to feel surprised by a request like this. So my hope is that they will either help me tweak it so that it's satisfactory to them or accept it. But if they don't, I still think it's a good thing to get on their radar. And let them know that we're thinking that in addition to just doing the study,
We guys should do something with it. So 100,000 looks small to me, but it sounds like maybe you've got some prototypes, some ideas of kinds of projects that might come out of this, and one of those would likely fit into 100,000.
I think either the design or the first part of implementation, because I think we'll have to engage some building specialists and things like that. In reading about flat roofs like we have, there's some talk about just changing the color of your overlay and that kind of thing matter. So if our findings said something like that, we could probably start to work with the team to design what that would look like. And then the next year, we'd be looking at the funding for the real project.
Okay, so I'm sorry, so 125 in your head this looks like 25 for design and 100 for construction.
Yeah, I was guessing we would sort of strategically choose some project or projects that would fit into that.
Okay.
The other thing to know about CIP, of course, everybody loves it when you can start your request at the farthest year out, but that's not a requirement. So if we got closer to this or into this, if we decided to submit something for, the next fiscal year, there's nothing that says you can't do that. We tried a future cast, but needs come up that weren't known. So we're not stuck with this amount in this year. We could also amend it. So we know better as we got there. We'll certainly hope we'll be out of COVID at that point. But another issue that lots of projects are facing right now is just supply.
Sure.
And we're seeing a little bit more of the ask of pay 100% upfront before materials are delivered and things like that. We haven't been affected yet, but it's hard to predict what the landscape will be.
Okay. So moving on to the annual report, Ellsworth's report, this goes to the city, is that right?
So the annual report, I don't think I'm actually required to write the annual report. It feels like something that I should do. So I enjoy the reflection on the year. We typically put the whole or part of a narrative on the website with our sort of year in review. But it really was just it's an opportunity to kind of reflect and think about what's been great, what's been hard. But it doesn't have any great significance like go into our state reporting file or anything like that.
Comments? Okay. Moving on then to the departmental reports. Let's see which one comes first. I guess Sam's report comes first. The welcome desk, it's open now sometimes?
It is. So as we kind of brought our volunteers back and we've initiated new ones, the staffing of it has been kind of semi-regular. I think we're trying to decide where it has the most impact, but we do have, we have some frequent flyers who like getting tracking questions for us. And it's kind of delightful to see the array of them from everything to great question. The restroom is down and to your right. They can help you fax upstairs. And I don't know about you, but I feel like the lessons we learned from Lottie Grab and Go, where it's like, are we masking? Aren't we masking? Is there a threshold? Do I have to wait outside? Just the navigation of space right now is so uncertain, and I think will continue to be. So to have that friendly engagement base, I think is not only meaningful for our public, but those who have not been able to serve them in this capacity for over a year.
So is the ultimate goal to have it staffed all the time the library's open?
That's Terry's goal, and I want to really support them in that. Particularly, I think during like our heaviest use hours. So I think as we continue to see us grow in services, we'll watch that door count. We'll continue to look at those questions that are coming and maybe feed those to public relations too. Like what is not obvious to you when you're walking into space and how can we make that better?
Other comments? What is this picture? What is this a picture of?
Oh, I got so excited. I took a picture of all planes at the flying pancake breakfast. Somebody actually let me get in the cockpit before we started, and I took several photos of me, but I thought you'd be much less interested in that.
You were wrong, right?
So that was like where I was going to make my daring escape, but they didn't.
How about the figures in the costume?
Oh, so that was a group of indigenous dancers that came down from Minneapolis during the Latino Fest, and so they were like 12 feet from our booth, right there on stage, where the fountains are on the Pedmal. So Latino Fest was absolutely delightful because we were so close to the action. We could just say, cool off and get a bag and a library card right behind me. And folks just kind of filed in on that sunny Saturday and did so.
Cool.
It was hot. That was the one of the 105-degree days.
Yeah, I wasn't wearing the sweatshirt all day.
So can I go back and ask about that volunteer desk? Have other libraries used a desk like that, a reading desk?
Yeah.
And what I'm wondering is if it parallels like the Walmart readers in terms of dropping stuff.
Oh.
Because you have a face contact and it doesn't matter what that person does, like they say hello or makes eye contact. You see theft rates fall. And I'm wondering if other libraries have found that true.
That's an interesting angle. We're one of 4 libraries doing it in Iowa, and we've reached out to other folks too. And that wasn't a piece of the initial conversation, but I'd like to
But something about the eye contact, and those greeters in stores are not there for no reason. They're there first to make you look up at the camera and then to give you that personal interaction, like the eye contact. And I'm just wondering if there's other.
It will also just like setting the social mores of the space. You know what I mean? Because it's
Right.
big and monolithic that it can be intimidating.
Right, there's a
So it's like-
person there now, right? And I'm just wondering in a year if we see any trends with
We can track that.
materials.
The eye contact effect on behavior is
Right.
one of the main drivers that I support with this, because I think of a group that we consistently had trouble with before the pandemic, so that middle school age group, as a big team of folks, and would go up the stairs and sort of escalate on their way. They didn't have any contact with staff from the outside, all the way through that big lobby, into the building, up the stairs. I think having somebody with a name tag and a smile and sort of a welcome
That's right,
is really going to help reset
right.
the expectation. I'm not saying that we're going to go into silent library moment, but just a sort of a reminder, oh, right, there are other people here.
And they saw my face.
Yep. And
Yeah, but it's going to take a long time to see if that makes a difference, but I'm wondering, and we're in weird times now, so I don't know what our baseline is, but I'm thinking in 2 years or something, if we see any change, if there's any way to measure their what other libraries saw, because I think you're right, there could be behavioral awareness once you've made eye contact with someone when you walk in the building.
Some of our legacy volunteers who are like really into this and giving me some questions back and giving me data, I might just like entertain that conversation
Yay.
and see what they observe if you'd like.
Right, even anecdotally.
Yeah. Okay.
And maybe we have to wait till the summer, I don't know, but it just,
Terry has been doing, Terry Byers has been doing an exceptional job of taking a formed but new concept idea and just started continuing to tweak it, work with the volunteers. Some volunteers were super excited. Others
is it,
took a little more head so. But I think that as people do it, I hear more and more positive. And I think it's only going to get better as we figure out what piece of furniture do we really need? Do we need the plexiglass? Do we need a computer? Just sort of moving through those decisions. I think right now what we see is probably the clunkiest version that we'll ever have. So.
but I also like it because you hear people saying no one spoke to them in an entire day. At least someone there says hello when you walk in. It's not isolating people.
Especially after such an isolating time.
Yeah. It's interesting to watch.
Be honest, like I've worked from home for the last 5 years, and in the worst parts of this, seeing a Walmart greeter would make. So that
You
can't
need
be
to go
overstated.
hang out at the University of Iowa hospitals. There's like people saying hello to you everywhere.
Oh, I
Not even-
Not anymore. You don't walk through the hospital.
Just to get in, you have to be told hello many times before they let you in and give you.
It's like you go in there, you have to go through security checks.
I used to have my short.
Okay, thank you for a very interesting and colorful report. And now we have a report from Jason, which is also very interesting, though maybe not quite as colorful.
I'm never more aware of it, I guess. I've got no airplanes.
No dancers.
I tried to get there through text. Journey.
I appreciated the information about the computer time. I thought was really interesting.
It's been a long-term goal for the department. And we just sort of thought we were blocked forever, and Brent sort of uncovered the key. So it's been working really well to be able to offer people the extended time without having to interact with them, without having to permission, you know?
Yeah.
And instead it's just an assumption of an extra time. And even met with workforce development, Iowa Works last week, and was able to offer to the staff there, like, you know, when your people here have hit a wall of time, you can always refer to the library for a longer computer session time, which is like plus all of our training. So.
I thought it was great. Let's see. Any other Questions, comments?
We've since hired a digital media lab intern since this was published, so they'll be more regularly staffed to help it.
So what's regular?
Sorry, what's that?
What's regular?
3 times a week.
Like for
They're part-time.
whole day or part of the day?
I think it's 5-hour shifts. A weekend and 2 nights. Universities.
Comments? Okay, moving on to Patty's report.
I will add my thanks to Ellsworth's written thanks to everybody who was able to come to our 125th birthday party. It was a lot of fun. It was very hot there too.
Yeah.
And I don't know yet how the eat out to read part benefits the library. We wait to hear from Big Grove about that. But other than that, I thought I'd write about all those items we got valued at $598 last year in our pink sheet process. So people have any questions?
I thought that was interesting too. It was very,
Yeah, I totally
very
forgot about
informative.
that.
I didn't know about pink sheets.
Thank you. And we're very happy to be invigorating the development office to go from 1.5 people full staff in the near future.
Has he started?
He started a week ago Monday. Yes, today was day 7. 8. Today's Thursday, right?
It keeps coming back.
He's coming back every morning. Yes, it's awesome.
Okay. There's a miscellaneous item on the agenda. I don't know what that is, so maybe we won't do that one. Next is the president's report, and this has been sort of a work in progress for me. I've lost my. First of all, every year we take a picture of the board, and this year I'm proposing that the board photo be on November the 18th. I know there's a couple of us not here in October, so if November the 18th, if you think you're going to be here and you want to dress up for the occasion, or you may just come as you are, it's okay, but that's okay. November the 18th, maybe we'll set as the board photo date, and that's usually done at the beginning of the meeting. Okay. The board recognition dinner, there's no update because COVID is still raging. My personal feeling, if we get too far out from the new board members and the old board members being gone, it kind of loses its purpose, but we'll just wait and see what happens. Perhaps a holiday gathering, which wouldn't even have to be necessarily after a board meeting, would be a more appropriate way to visit with each other. I don't have any update anyway. With the hospital and stuff full of COVID people, I don't think now is the time to be planning a board dinner. The third item, this item keeps coming back and coming back. We all know as a board, we should be doing something about continuing education. Kelly has been quite proactive about sending out educational opportunities, and I noticed just maybe yesterday, day before, she sent out a link to the Board of Trustees manual, the Iowa Library Board of Trustees handbook, I guess it's called. I have started reading through that, and personally, I consider that to be continuing education for me because I'm learning a lot just reading through that. And it's maybe not as dry as the personnel policy, but it's interesting. You learn a lot. I mean, it really is, it's a good thing to do. So I would recommend if anybody's interested in sort of self-continuing education, I consider that to be just as good as sitting in on a lecture that you may or may not get too much out of. If you want to, I mean, Kelly has made it possible for all of us to have Iowa Learns accounts, and we can then listen to webinars or listen to recorded presentations. That's an option too, and you can log your hours that way. In the library handbook that I started to, chapter 2 is called the culture of learning. And basically it says the board is responsible for promoting a culture of learning, which basically means the board should learn stuff, but also support the learning opportunities for staff and the director. And it's the board obligation to make sure that we include that in the funding for the library. So it's not, we're supposed to promote a culture of learning, not just learn stuff on our own. And it basically, it says all members of library board of trustees participate in a variety of board development training each year. The recommended average is 5 hours per year per trustee. If you decide you want to read the packet, the handbook, I think that's great. If you want to attend the staff development or staff, what do you call it? In-service? In-service day, which by the way is coming up on December the 10th. I really, really encourage people to attend if they can. That's more than 5 hours right there. And it's a really, well, I don't know what this one's going to be like, but the 3 that I've attended have been really good. So that's a way to get it to get continuing education in, really things that, well, especially, I think especially if Brent's reports to us, I learn a lot every time he gives us a report. I don't lots of times understand exactly what he's explaining, but I think if you take a very expansive view of what continuing ed is, I think it's not that difficult. I just encourage people to learn stuff as we go along. And if you learn stuff and it somehow works its way into the board minutes, then it's recorded. So that's a good thing too. So, okay, that's my continuing ed spiel. I think that's about it. I don't know, Ellsworth, if we, as a board, discuss the situation of a board member not being able to attend meetings.
With the quorum. With
Well, we have a board member who now has a conflict and can't attend on Thursdays in person. And I've been on the board long enough that I know this came up once before, and it wasn't a comfortable situation. The board member who was moving temporarily to another city for educational opportunities for his daughter, he was an awesome board member. Everybody liked him. He contributed. He was great, but he couldn't be here. And that sort of precluded his ability to continue to be on the board. One other thing that I've looked at is it's called the local ordinance. When the city set up the library, they set out what the ordinance is. And one of the things is that a board member who misses more than 4 consecutive meetings is not on the board anymore. So the question is, if you attend via Zoom, does that count? I think because we have to have a quorum of in person, it's not really fair to allow people to regularly attend via Zoom.
As an information, in the past, the decision was not ours.
Okay,
We do not appoint members.
right, we don't,
The decision was for the city to step in and discuss it with them.
right, right. And
So it wasn't really a discussion.
wasn't really a
It's not a
discussion,
discussion for the board to make. It's a city appointment.
but we did, while I was in on the meeting, I don't think we made the decision. I agree with you, but it was,
We did not, we sought their opinion and they discussed it with the person and then sent me a letter to send forward saying they're looking at community representation on the board.
okay,
And it was based on value of how they felt the community could be best represented. So we did not take it. We had said to the board member, we will leave this in the city's hands and we will follow their recommendation, whatever way it fell. But this was, since we do not appoint,
we don't appoint,
we
right?
do not remove.
Okay, all right,
That's been the historical precedent that the city took on.
okay,
Something could have changed since when this happened. It wasn't an exceptional board member, simply was the city deciding who's the best to represent the community in a board. And that person also was not going to be attending by Zoom. They were not going to be attending at all for a year. The Zoom attendance is another issue, but they were not going to be available to attend any meetings for at least a year,
right.
even virtually.
Well, this was sort of pre-Zoom days. He was already calling in some.
No, that person had already been attending 50% of the time by Zoom because their office was in LA. In some cases, this was a situation of, it wasn't based on virtual, as that person said they would not be attending any meetings for a year. They were not willing to do virtual either. So it was, the setting, it had some similarities, but there were differences and it was going to be a complete absence. But again, what the city said is we do not appoint. Since our board doesn't appoint, the city does. It's
Okay,
kind of outside of our hands.
it's sort of a moot point then.
Except that the city should be informed.
The city was, the city was the important, the city was the one that,
Maybe, I'll probably will talk to you.
Okay, okay.
if something could have changed since that happened the year you were hired. So,
Yeah, we can find out what the.
it just, and that was the logic behind it. Since we don't appoint, we can't really.
Well, the sands have shifted a little bit. I'm not, in that people have become so used to attending.
Right, that person's, and that sounds like this board member offering to attend virtually.
Except that I don't understand how you can attend virtually, but you can't attend in person. And it seems like if you have a time conflict, you have a time conflict, but.
Unless the travel
Transit.
kills it.
No, and I've also attended virtually.
Unless the travel kills it.
Right,
Yeah.
and I've attended virtually when I've had to work out of the country and I've attended virtually.
Which I think is, but I think
Periodic.
Yeah,
as a substitute for
right,
being ever in person.
right. It wasn't a year gap. It was.
Right. Okay, so let me know what I need to do and I'll do it.
I haven't seen that.
Oh, okay,
Very shortly ago,
okay.
this afternoon.
And don't be surprised if this, we suddenly said, we're to turn it back to you, that they're not consistent at the time.
We're just gonna, hopefully they don't. It's a lot easier to.
We'll dump it back on you now.
Appoint a person, so they'll-
Right, that was our rationale. We can't appoint, so we can't
It's in the
remove.
local ordinance, so,
Right,
They have to
and
do it.
we need the city attorney to
Right.
interpret the ordinance
right.
in light of.
Actually, it was the person who speaks for the council in the appointment of the board that did it. And I can't remember what her name was. There was who worked right under Eleanor Dilks at the time, but I can't. But there's a person who's in charge of committees and commissions. And it was her prerogative.
Anyway, that's how we got Wes. He was a great board member.
Right, so that's how we got Wes.
That's how we got Wes.
Right away.
Okay. There goes my agenda. Announcements from members. This would be a great time to comment on all your continuing ed opportunities. Committee reports, has the Foundation Committee met?
The Friends Foundation met today. It was mostly an introductory meeting because we had a lot of new board members. Are there, how many? There are a lot of new board members. How many
There
are
are
there?
7 new board members as you approved last year, right? So they're at the maximum number.
So it was a lot of introductions and explaining what you have to do as a Friends Foundation board member. And sharing of book recommendations, which seems like a good way to start any meeting.
Yeah. I agree.
No other communications, like, were there some included in the packet? Remember,
Just jumped straight to last month.
yeah. Okay, so moving on to the consent agenda, we have to approve the meeting minutes from last month's board meeting and approve the disbursements. Bearing in mind that the board minutes are the legal record of our meetings. It's really great if you do read them carefully. Anyway, can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Okay. Second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No. All righty, and the last thing on the agenda is to set the agenda for next month. And you got a revised October agenda, looks like this, same as the other one, only without the blue. So in October, we will hopefully be presented with your budget and brief, right? We'll go over the first quarter statistics, policy reviews, our policy 103 and 808, which is actually a correction. The original packet said 802, but it's policy 808, Art Advisory Committee. And if nobody else has anything to add, I move that we adjourn.